For anyone hoping Shadow and Kaydee are heading toward a future together. Pete Bloom delivered the sentence they wanted to hear. Then he immediately gave them a reason to worry. Bloom, a raptor biologist who has spent more than 4 decades working with birds of prey and who helped band Kaydee when she was young, believes there is a very good chance these 2 eagles could become a pair when nesting begins. That sounds like the happy ending, but it isn't. Because becoming a pair may actually be the easiest part. What comes after that is where things can go terribly wrong. Kaydee is only about 4.5 years old. She is reaching the age when bald eagles can breed. But being physically old enough to produce an egg is not the same thing as knowing how to successfully raise a chick. And Bloom's warning was surprisingly blunt. Young eagles make mistakes, serious mistakes. Mistakes around eggs, mistakes around eaglets, mistakes that experienced birds may learn to avoid. He told the Los Angeles Times that inexperienced eagles can fail to feed a young chick enough, and that a vulnerable eaglet can die. His message was not that Kaydee cannot become a successful mother. His message was that experience matters. They get better at it as they get older, Bloom explained. And suddenly, everything viewers have been celebrating takes on a different meaning. The shared perches, the nest visits, the stick moving, the morning calls, the close contact, the possibility of a pair bond. All of those things may only be the beginning of a much more difficult test. Because bald eagle parenting is not a romantic ending. It is months of work. Before there is a chick, there must be a stable pair, then a nest, then courtship, then eggs, then incubation, then hatching, then almost constant protection, then feeding, again, and again, and again. The U.S. National Park Service notes that both adult bald eagles participate in building the nest, incubating eggs and feeding young. Eggs are incubated for roughly 35 days. After hatching, eaglets spend approximately 10 to 12 weeks in the nest before fledging. And even after that first flight, parental care can continue while the young birds are still dependent. That is a long chain, and every link has to hold. Think about what Kaydee has experienced so far. She was born around 2022 in the Prado Basin. She was banded while still young. Then she grew through the strange, mottled years of a subadult bald eagle. By August 2026, she had made her way roughly 70 miles to Big Bear. There she encountered one of the most famous eagle territories in the world. A huge established nest, a lake, familiar perches, and shadow. Within days, she went from an unknown visitor to an eagle repeatedly appearing around the resident male. She entered the nest, moved sticks, roosted nearby, called at dawn, followed shadow, and eventually received a name from friends of Big Bear Valley, Kaydee. It feels fast because it is fast, and that speed is exactly what makes Bloom's warning so important. A 4.5-year-old bald eagle is not a baby. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service says most bald eagles can breed around 4 or 5 years old. Their adult white head and tail also generally emerge around age 5. Kaydee is standing right on that biological threshold, old enough that breeding is possible, young enough that her first real attempt at raising offspring could still be ahead of her. And first attempts are not guaranteed to succeed. Even experienced bald eagles face brutal odds. Bad weather can arrive. Food can become difficult to find. Eggs may fail. Predators can appear. A nestling can become sick. A chick can be exposed. A parent can disappear at the wrong time. Nothing about a nest is guaranteed simply because 2 adults build it together. Big Bear viewers know that better than almost anyone. In January 2026, Jackie and Shadow had 2 eggs in the nest. Then both adults were away. Ravens entered. Both eggs were breached. Friends of Big Bear Valley described the loss as heartbreaking. The story could have ended there. Instead, Jackie later produced another clutch. And that season eventually gave Big Bear Sandy and Luna 2 eaglets raised by Jackie and Shadow before they were last seen in the area in July. That is how quickly an eagle season can move from failure to success, and from success back into uncertainty. Kaydee would enter that world without Jackie's years of accumulated experience. That does not make her weak. It makes her young. There is a difference. One of the easiest traps for viewers is assuming that instinct does everything. An eagle moves, sticks. Therefore, it knows how to build the perfect nest. An eagle lays an egg. Therefore, it knows how to incubate perfectly. A chick opens its beak. Therefore, a parent automatically feeds it exactly when needed. Nature is rarely that clean. Instinct gives an animal a starting point. Experience can refine what happens next. Bloom's warning is powerful precisely because he has spent decades watching raptors. He did not say Kaydee will fail. He said young eagles can make grave mistakes while raising young. And that should completely change what we watch for if this association with Shadow continues. Right now, most viewers are asking, will they become a pair? But imagine we get the answer. Imagine December arrives. Shadow and Kaydee remain together. Nest work increases. Courtship becomes clearer. Then an egg appears. The entire world celebrates. At that moment, a new question begins. Can they actually pull this off? Because an egg would not be the ending. It would be the beginning of the most demanding phase Kaydee has ever experienced. Incubation alone requires coordination. Bald eagle pairs share the responsibility. An egg cannot simply be left exposed whenever both birds feel like leaving. Temperature matters, weather matters, timing matters, predator risk matters. When one bird leaves, the other may need to take over. The transition can look ordinary on camera. One eagle stands, another arrives. The first leaves. But the consequences of those small transitions can be enormous. Then the egg hatches. Now the challenge becomes even harder. A newborn eaglet is completely dependent on its parents. It cannot fly away from danger. It cannot find its own fish. It cannot regulate every threat around it. The parents become hunters, guards, and caregivers at the same time. And that is where Bloom's example becomes uncomfortable. A young eagle can miss feedings. It can make mistakes. A tiny chick does not have much room for error. Bloom even mentioned another danger that has nothing to do with parenting skill. A mountain lion could take a chick. That example reminds us of something important. Even perfect parents cannot control everything. So if Kaydee eventually raises young, success will depend on both what she learns and what the environment throws at them. That is why Shadow may matter so much. Shadow is not entering his first nesting season. He has years of experience in this territory. He has built nests, incubated, delivered food, fed eaglets, defended the territory, endured storms, lost eggs, raised young, started again. If Kaydee becomes his partner, she would not be learning beside another inexperienced eagle. She would be beside a male who has already gone through the cycle many times. That does not guarantee success, but it could matter. Watch Shadow around the nest even now. He knows the structure. He knows the perch trees. He knows the lake. He knows the rhythms of this territory in ways Kaydee cannot yet know. She arrived only recently. He has lived the seasons. And perhaps that is the most fascinating future story of all. Not simply will Shadow accept Kaydee, but if he does, what can an experienced male and an inexperienced young female become together? On August 23rd, viewers got a tiny preview of how uneven that learning process might look. Kaydee entered the nest and attacked the stick problem with confidence. She pulled, lifted, rearranged. Shadow watched. Then he joined some of the nest work. At another moment, she tried getting close to him physically. Shadow appeared to push back. There were boundaries. But that friction may be exactly what viewers should expect from two birds that are not yet an established long-term pair. They do not have Jackie's and Shadow's history. They are negotiating space in real time. Where can Kaydee stand? How close can she get? What does Shadow tolerate? When does he move away? When does he join her? When does she follow him? These tiny social adjustments come before any hypothetical parenting season, and that makes the next months more interesting than a simple yes or no romance. The story has stages. Right now, we may be watching association, then perhaps pair formation, then increasing territorial coordination, then more serious nest preparation. then courtship. Only after all of that might we even reach eggs. And at every stage the story can change. Kaydee could leave. Another eagle could appear. Shadow could become less tolerant. Seasonal behavior could strengthen their association. No one knows. That uncertainty is not a weakness in the story. It is the engine. Bloom has given us one of the strongest predictions so far, saying he considers it highly likely that the birds that currently seem to be forming a pair bond could be a pair by nesting time. But his warning stops us from treating pair formation as the finish line. And that may be the most important lesson. For humans watching through a camera, a pair looks like the happy ending. For an eagle, a pair may simply be the beginning of the work. Imagine the first cold morning of a future nesting season. Snow on the branches, wind crossing the lake, Kaydee in the nest, Shadow approaching with food or nest material. At that point, nobody will care that she followed him 2 seconds after a flight in August. Nobody will care about one cute head tilt toward the camera. The questions will be harder. Does Kaydee remain on the nest when she needs to? Does she coordinate incubation changes? Does she respond correctly to threats? Can both birds provide enough food? If chicks hatch, can they keep them protected? And when something goes wrong, and something almost always goes wrong at some point, how do they respond? That is where experience becomes visible. Not in a romantic-looking perch, in pressure. Jackie and Shadow built their famous history partly because viewers saw them through pressure. Snow piled around them. Eggs failed. Chicks hatched. Predators arrived. Weather changed. Branches shook. Food was delivered. They returned again and again. That history took years. Kaydee does not have years with Shadow. She has weeks. So comparing her to Jackie right now would be unfair to both eagles. Jackie became the bird viewers knew through repeated seasons. Kaydee has not even reached her first possible nesting season in Big Bear. If she remains, her story has to be allowed to begin at the beginning. With mistakes, with awkwardness, with learning, possibly with failure, and perhaps eventually with success. That possibility should not make the story less exciting. It should make it more meaningful. Because if Kaydee one day becomes a capable breeding adult in this territory, viewers could witness the transformation from almost the very start. From a modeled young visitor, to the eagle exploring the twin pines, to the bird entering the nest, to the newcomer moving sticks, to Shadow's possible partner, to perhaps someday a first-time mother. That is a much bigger story than simply asking whether she and Shadow look cute together. But it also carries more risk. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service notes that young eagles face significant mortality from disease, food shortage, weather, and human-related hazards. Wildlife adulthood is not gentle, and raising another eagle makes the stakes even higher. And if that future really does arrive, there is one part of the story that may surprise viewers who are focused only on whether Shadow and Kaydee become a pair. The hardest work begins before a chick is ever visible. Big Bear's nesting cycle does not switch on overnight. In past seasons, Friends of Big Bear Valley has documented Jackie and Shadow increasing nest work as colder weather approaches, bringing sticks, rearranging the structure, working the nest bowl, and spending more time around the territory. By winter, small changes that looked meaningless in summer could become part of a much more serious routine. That means Kaydee would not suddenly wake up one January morning and become a parent. If she remains, the learning would begin much earlier. Where does Shadow collect branches? How does he approach the nest when another eagle is already inside? How does the pair divide time between the nest and the wider territory? What happens when one bird wants a stick placed in one location and the other eagle has a different idea? Those questions sound almost funny until an egg arrives. Then every small habit matters. The nest is not just a pile of branches. It has to support adults' eggs and eventually growing eaglets through wind, snow, and constant movement. Shadow has years of practical experience with this exact structure. Kaydee does not. That experience difference could become one of the most compelling things to watch. Imagine the first serious wave of nest work. Shadow arrives with a branch. Kaydee is already there. Does she move toward him? Does she take the stick? Does he place it himself? Do they work around each other smoothly, or do they spend half the visit negotiating space? None of those moments would prove future success. But together they would show whether two individual birds are learning a shared routine. Then comes a far more demanding stage. If eggs are eventually laid, the nest stops being a construction project and becomes a schedule. Bald eagle incubation lasts roughly 35 days. That means more than a month of repeated exchanges, long periods on the nest, and constant vulnerability to weather and disturbance. One bird cannot simply decide to take the afternoon off without consequences. And this is where Shadow's experience could become critical. He has already lived through those exchanges. He knows the big bare nest in snow. He knows the exposed branches. He knows the familiar flight lines. He has watched eggs fail and watched eggs hatch. Kaydee would be learning the same world from a new position. She might be capable of breeding, but capability is only the entrance ticket. Successful parenting is a performance repeated every day. Then imagine the moment the shell finally breaks. For viewers, hatching feels like victory. For the parents, the work becomes harder. A newly hatched eaglet cannot regulate life the way an adult can. It needs warmth, it needs food, it needs protection, and it needs those things again and again. Pete Bloom's warning becomes most serious here. His point was not abstract. He specifically noted that young eagles can make grave mistakes in rearing young, including missing enough feedings that a vulnerable chick can perish. That is not a prediction about Kaydee. It is a reminder that the first attempt at parenting can expose every weakness in coordination and experience, and Big Bear itself can add pressure. The same nest has seen deep snow, strong wind, ravens, other eagles, loon absences, failed eggs, successful chicks. Nothing about this territory guarantees an easy season. That is why the story becomes much bigger than romance. A viewer might click because Shadow and Kaydee touched beaks. But if they ever produce an egg, the reason to keep watching will be completely different. Now every departure matters. Every return matters. Every food delivery matters. Every shadow crossing the nest matters. The drama changes from, do they like each other, to, can they keep this tiny life alive? And there is one more twist. Experience is not the same thing as perfection. Shadow has years behind him, but experienced parents still lose eggs and chicks. January 2026 proved that with brutal clarity. 2 eggs were present. Then came an unattended window. Ravens entered. Both eggs were breached. Shadow's experience could not reverse what happened once the opportunity opened. Yet the same season also showed resilience. Jackie and Shadow did not simply disappear after the loss. The nesting cycle continued. Later, Sandy and Luna were raised in that same territory. That is the lesson Kaydee would be entering. Success is not the absence of failure. It is the ability of a pair to continue functioning through failure. If Kaydee eventually joins Shadow in that cycle, viewers may see awkwardness. They may see a stick placed badly, an exchange that takes too long, a moment when one eagle seems unsure. It will be tempting to judge every one of those clips instantly. But the more meaningful question will be whether the pattern improves. Does coordination get smoother? Does Kaydee become more confident at the nest? Does she respond faster to Shadow? Does he respond to her? Does the pair recover after a mistake? That is what Bloom's warning changes. Age does not remove danger. Experience is built through repeated seasons. If Kaydee stays, she would not simply be learning how to sit beside Shadow. She could be learning how to protect an egg, feed a chick, and coordinate with an experienced male when the territory turns difficult. That does not ruin the hope. It makes the hope real. So if the next several months bring encouraging signs, celebrate them. If Shadow approaches, Kaydee, notice. If they roost together, notice. If nest work increases, notice. But do not rush past the difficult part. Pair bonding is not proof of successful parenting. Egg laying is not proof of hatching. Hatching is not proof of fledging. Fledging is not proof the young bird will survive. Every stage opens another test. That is what Bloom's warning really gives us. Not a reason to expect tragedy, a reason to understand the stakes. Kaydee may be entering the most important transition of her life. She is leaving the wandering years behind. Adult plumage is approaching. Breeding age is approaching. A territory may be taking shape around her. An adult male is repeatedly nearby. And for the first time, viewers may be seeing the early pieces of a future nesting partnership. But if it happens, she will have to learn quickly. Shadow can help. Instinct can help. A strong territory can help. None of them can guarantee the outcome. And that is why the most dramatic chapter may not be happening now. It may come months from now, when all the playful speculation stops, when the nest matters again, when the temperature drops, when a single egg changes everything. And perhaps one day when a tiny eaglet lifts its head and waits for Kaydee to know exactly what to do. That will be the moment Pete Bloom's warning becomes real. Because getting Shadow may never have been Kaydee's hardest challenge. Becoming the eagle that can successfully raise the next generation could be.